Hey guys, it's Magdalene. Welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how I sew double jet pockets as part of my blazer sewing tutorial, which I have coming up next. I did want to make a separate tutorial because this is quite long and I didn't want my blazer tutorial to be super long. So that's why I've done a separate tutorial. So keep an eye out for that one. I hope you've got your notifications turned on. And before I get started, if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe. Here is the tutorial. So I'm adding double jetted pockets to the blazer for the tutorial that I've got coming up next, and here I'm just marking out my pocket opening again in chalk so that you can see it a bit clearly. Here are my two jet strips, and I've added interfacing to my strips. Also on the other side of my garment piece it has been interfaced also. And I'm laying my raw edge to the pocket opening and pinning it down. Then I'm using a piece of chalk to mark the end of my pocket onto my jet strip at the top and the bottom. Then I've taken my second strip for my jet pocket and laid that with the edge on the line of my pocket opening and pinned it. Then I've continued that chalk line onto that jet piece. Then I'm going to take this over to my machine and sew from the top of that chalk mark to the bottom of the chalk mark the width of the foot so that the edge of my jet is aligned with the edge of my foot. And also I have to be really careful that I start and stop exactly on the chalk lines on both sides. And this is really important because this is the edge of your jet pocket. So if one starts before or after, the edge of your pocket will not be straight, it will be diagonal. So again, you have to be really careful to make sure that these points are accurate. So here you can see that I managed to start and stop at exactly the same point. Next thing you need to do is to cut along your pocket opening, and you're going to cut along the pocket opening starting and stopping 1 centimeter before the end of your pocket. So here I've just pinched my fabric and I made a snip. Once you snip along the pocket opening and you stop at that 1 centimeter mark, you're going to cut in a diagonal to the end of your stitch. So this will create two little triangle pieces. And here you can see I've turned it over so that you can see a little bit more clearly what I'm doing. Stopping my snip just before my stitch line. You don't want to cut into your snip because your jets will unravel. So be really careful, but cut as closely as you can to the end of your stitch. And also you want to only cut through the garment piece, not through the jet pockets. Once you've snipped into your corners and you've got your triangle, then push the jets through to the wrong side. Here I've turned over my garment piece and pulled my jets through so you can see it from the other side. And the first thing I'm going to do before I fold in my jets is to open up my seam allowance and iron them flat. And this is also going to help with folding back my jets. Here are my seam allowances, ironed nice and flat on both sides, and I'm going to use this seam allowance to fold my jet over. So using the seam allowance as your guide, fold your jet over the seam allowance. So make sure that the seam allowance stays nice and flat, it doesn't wrinkle or fold because it is a guide and it's the perfect width for your jets. Once you've folded them over, go in with the iron and make sure that your jets are nice and flat. And also the triangle piece, you want them to be facing outwards because these, as I said, are the edge of your pockets. So make sure that you iron the triangle piece flat, facing outwards. The next step is to sew the triangle down to the seam allowance of your jet pockets. And you also want to be careful that your jets don't overlap when you're sewing down the triangle. So here, as you can see, my jets didn't overlap and I managed to get the line really nice and straight. Next thing to do is to sew our pocket bags, and I've cut one pocket bag out in garment fabric and one in lining fabric. The reason I've cut one out in garment fabric is so that when I open up my pocket, you see garment and not lining. So I'm placing the raw edge of my pocket bag to the raw edge of my jet, and I'm going to attach it using a 1 cm seam allowance. Once I've sewn that on, I'm going to then attach the seam allowance of my jet to the pocket bag. And I'm going to do the same with the lining. I'm going to place the raw edge of my pocket bag to the raw edge of my jet, sew it on, and then attach the seam allowance. So here are my pocket bags attached, and you can see the 2 seam lines that I sewed on the seam allowance and one where I attached the excess seam allowance to my pocket bag. And here you can see when I open my pocket, you have a nice sparkly garment fabric. So because our pocket bags are cut the same size, and because one is sewn on higher than the other, this makes the bottom pocket bag, which is the lining fabric, longer. So instead of cutting any of that off, what I like to do is to fold in a pleat, usually about 1/2 centimetre, and I'll iron that in, and this then makes the pocket bags the same size without losing any volume in the pocket bag. Then pin the pocket bag together, making sure that you pin your pleat down and sew around the pocket bag, and it is done. So that was the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget that this is part of sewing the blazer tutorial. Don't forget to check that out when it's uploaded. It will be up in a couple of hours. It is currently uploading, and I will see you in the next tutorial, guys. Please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, comment and subscribe. See you next time. Bye.